Welcome, welcome everyone. Hello, happy Wednesday. I'm hoping you can hear me and see my screen. I was having a little trouble with the music. I hope you could hear it on your end. It was pump up music for today's webinar because we're going to have a little fun. Welcome. This is our monthly webinar series. We call it So You're an RN, What's Next? It's about professional development and supporting nurses in your nursing role and in the full breadth of your nursing career. So whether you're a new graduate about to enter the RN world or new graduate about to enter the NP world, this webinar hopefully is really intended to serve you best because a lot of things overlap when you're entering the world as a new graduate. So that's what we're going to get into today. My name is Hiva Kolodrovitz. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a family nurse practitioner. I started off my career more than a decade ago as a pediatric nurse and went back to school and became a family nurse practitioner. And I've made all the mistakes, and I'm here to talk about it and hopefully pass on some advice to you guys today so that you are starting off with a stronger footing in the healthcare field so that you can feel satisfied in your career as you're moving forward. I'm going to introduce to you who we have on our panel today in just a minute, but let's talk about what we're going to go over in this webinar today. The topics that we'll cover, first and foremost, we're going to talk about how to choose a clinical setting. Choosing your clinical setting is going to be one of the most important things that you do. We'll talk about why, but this really does set you up for success or failure. So we're going to go into in depth about that, about how do you even go about choosing the right clinical setting that's going to be a good fit for you, right? That's really important. We're also going to talk about building that support system, right? So not only do you choose the right clinical setting, but part of that comes with your support network. And here at Archer, we're big on building a supportive community for our nurses. And we want you to feel supported not only within Archer, but also in your local community. So we're going to talk about that, how to build that network in your own local community as well. And then we're going to talk about a really tough topic. I know this was something that I was really nervous about and I was terrible at, and I'm probably still not so great with negotiating, right? But that negotiating your first offer, we really need to talk about an open discussion about what are the different things that you need to be talking about with your employer or with your potential employer, and how to really make sure that you are negotiating and you know your worth and you know your value going in. I know a lot of new nurses, a lot of new NPs don't feel confident in this arena. So I want you to walk away today feeling more confident. That is my goal. So before we jump in, if you have been in my webinars before, you know that I really like to use the Slido tool. Our lovely Rachel Taylor introduced me to this, and I really enjoy it because it's a nice way to interact with you guys. So for those of you who are participating on phones or have a phone, you can go ahead and scan this QR code and it should take you to slido.com. So I want you to do that now. And for those of you who are joining on a computer, so you don't want to kind of toggle back and forth on a phone, you rather do it on your laptop, you could just go to slido.com and put in that hashtag new grad. And the first poll should be there. I have launched it for you. And we're going to do a couple of fun polls just to get us warmed up on Slido so everybody knows how to use it and feels comfortable as we're going through. But you'll see that this is a really nice tool because it doesn't put your name in there. So you're totally anonymous with your responses, and you can see other students' responses as well. So it's a really nice way to kind of gauge who else is saying and who else is on there. And then it's a nice way to also be open and honest without taking that risk of like, oh, my name's in there and you don't want the rest of the world to know what your response was. So it's a really fun tool to use. And I see some responses are coming in. So some of you are getting used to using it. Again, that QR code is right here if you didn't see it on the on that last page, and you can go to slido.com and just join with hashtag new grad. But the first poll is who's in the audience today? And I always love to see who's in my audience so that we can really have an open discussion tailored to you, right? Because I want to know, are you a new grad RN? Are you a new grad NP? Where are you in your nursing career? And I see a lot of nursing students, new grad RN, preparing for NCLEX. That's a big step. I remember I drove about 2 hours away from where I live just to go take my NCLEX exam because it was the only date I could get. And I slept in this like horrible motel, didn't sleep all night, and had to go to my exam. So we've all been there. It's really a stressful time, but you guys are going to be great. I know you are. And so a lot of preparing for NCLEX, ready to be a nurse, graduated nurse, new grad RN preparing for NCLEX. Wonderful. Anybody already take the NCLEX and in the job market and getting ready to really hit the ground running with finding a job? I see a lot of new RNs ready to be an RN. Awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and take us into our next poll is where are you joining from? So I always like to see where my audience is joining from, and we get a lot of fun places. So it's not just local, but we also get some international students, which is really nice to see. I personally grew up and did all my training in the Boston area, and then I've lived in California and worked in California. I'm now living and working in Texas, so I've kind of been all over the different coasts. And so we're getting a lot of responses. I see some Texas, shout out to Texas today. I see Michigan, Illinois. We got some international students. Welcome, welcome. A lot from Canada. Wow. Welcome, you guys. Some South Dakota, more Texas, Chicago, California. Very nice. This is great. Nepal. Wow. Welcome, you guys. Okay, and then we'll go into our next poll. And how long have you been a nurse? I also like to get that sense too for the people who are already nurses. And that could include whether you were an LPN or if you're a new nurse, this is your first year and you're like, you know what, I'm struggling and I really want to figure out how I can um, thrive in this field because I'm passionate about patient care and that's why I got into it, right? It's really important. So how long have you been in the field of nursing at any stage in your nursing career, right? So a lot of novice nurses and some experienced nurses in the group today. Wonderful. Yeah, a lot of experienced nurses. And so myself, I was a RN for about 3 years before I went back, and then now um, I'm coming on to my 10 years as an NP. It feels kind of surreal, but yeah, it goes by fast and slow at the same time. All right, and how many of you are actively looking for a job right now? And this is just a quick yes or no. Are you in the market? Are you not? How many of you are actively looking for a job? Seeing some responses coming through. So a lot of you are probably focusing on that NCLEX exam and you're like, I haven't even thought about the job yet. I'm just trying to pass my boards. But I see some people are in the job market and some people are not. So it's kind of split, almost 50-50 in the audience. Yeah. And my last poll for you guys is, how are you feeling about the job market? How confident do you feel graduating and getting out into the workforce? And again, if you've been on my webinars before, you know I really like my emojis. So I've made little emoji faces because sometimes you can't even put it on a 1 to 10 scale. It's just really a face, right? You're like, oh, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling very confident or not confident at all. And that's perfectly okay. Look at that. About 25% of you not feeling confident at all. About 30% of us are not feeling confident. And I understand that. It's a stressful time sitting for your boards and then looking for that first job. But I'm seeing also a lot of confidence, which is great. That's awesome. I love to see that. But you can see here that you're not alone, right? However way you're feeling, you have peers that are in that boat with you. So that's really nice. And like I said, my goal is to really hopefully get you to feel a little bit more confident going into that job market and graduating as a new nurse. So just to give you guys some statistics, you've probably either heard about this or you're experiencing it in your training, whether you're working clinically as well as going to school. You've heard this buzz term, people are talking about it, but there's really a healthcare worker shortage, right? And what does that mean? It's a shortage across the board. Physicians, nurses, COVID did not help. Right? That really stressed our healthcare system, led to a lot of burnout, a lot of staffing issues, right? Hospitals, units, outpatient clinics, a lot closed, a lot are suffering financially and not necessarily opening up those jobs that need to be open and putting more on the people who are there. Also, our aging workforce. So, a lot of people decided to leave during COVID and they said, you know what, I'm done. And they're aging in general and they're saying, it's time for me to retire. So, that's exacerbating our staffing issues. And then the training and education, that's been a big problem too. We're really seeing insufficient training programs and limited placement programs for new grads, and that's really impacting this overall picture. But on the bright side, look at this career outlook. So I know a lot of you, and when I went live this morning, I also was asking questions about where are you guys feeling the tension? And a lot of new nurses are feeling unsupported in their roles and they can't get those hospital jobs. So we'll talk about how to better position yourself for that. But look at the career outlook. So this is a statistic by the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and they project the growth of these careers in these fields, right? And this is the projected growth by 2033, which is a little less than 10 years. And just to give you some perspective, the average growth is somewhere between 3 to 4% in any field. And if you look at nursing, it's above that consistently across the board, whether you're looking at advanced practice, whether you're looking at administration, as a registered nurse, nurse educator. So really across the board, what this means is that the jobs are there, they will be there, and there are going to be even more jobs opening up. So that should make you feel confident in saying, okay, I may not have had the best luck of interviewing or finding the best job right now, but the job will come, right? I don't need to take the job that's not a good fit, that doesn't feel right, because I'm worried I'm not going to get a job, right? So that's what this says. There is a healthcare worker shortage. There's a need for you out there. Jobs are opening up. I want you to be selective and position yourself well so that you can succeed. That is my biggest takeaway for you today. So let's meet our panelists. And I want to really introduce Lexi. She's been patiently waiting and listening to me. Quickly about myself, like I said, I am a family nurse practitioner. I've had a lot of different experience both in specialty and primary care. And I really like supporting the new grads and also making sure we are setting ourselves up so we can really provide safe, effective, evidence-based medicine care to our patients, right? That is my biggest passion. And really promoting self-care among healthcare professionals is my main focus as well, because we tend to not take care of ourselves when we're taking care of others and doing really hard work. So that's one of my passions. This is our wonderful Lexi, who's our client success manager here at Archer. And I'm going to let Lexi introduce herself.
Hi there. Thanks, Eva. Thanks for that nice warm welcome. Hey, folks, I'm so excited to be here with you all. Like she said, my name is Lexi. I have also been a nurse for upwards of a decade, just like Eva. I'm not a nurse practitioner. I am a registered nurse, but I have definitely been doing this nurse thing for quite some time, I think since the very beginning of 2012. So, oh boy, we're coming on 13 years now. And like Eva said, right, it goes so fast, but also kind of slow at the same time. So, what I love about nursing, though, is how I've been able to do so many different things with being a registered nurse. So I really started my nursing journey as a med surg nurse. I was fortunate enough to start as in a nurse residency program, and it was at a large academic medical center. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge. For some of you new grads out there, that's a great place to start. They oftentimes have really excellent new grad programs. So just putting that out there for a couple of you who may be looking for more of a program like that, especially as you are starting off with your first nurse job. So I got a little burnt out from the med surge thing. The schedule wasn't quite right for me. So I actually kind of took a break from med surge and did hospice home case management for about a year. But I then realized I still really wanted hospital based experience. So I went back to my med surge unit, but this time on nights, where I actually had a little bit more control over my schedule. And instead of working full time, I was working zero point 0.8, so 80% of the time. But I made more money on nights. So it kind of offset that balance. But for me, right there, that was already that kind of introduction that you can use nursing and a different job and a different scheduling to really work for your life. So I didn't necessarily love med surge, and that's fine if you don't. I didn't, but I knew I needed med surge experience. In fact, I needed 2 full years of med surge experience before that trauma center that I worked at, the large academic medical center. They wanted you to have either critical care experience prior to working in their emergency department or the 2 years. So as soon as I hit that 2 year mark, I applied and I transferred down to the emergency department. So that was in 2015. I love emergency medicine. Even since I was a very young girl and I was watching ER, that television show with my mom, I knew that I loved emergency medicine. So that's really where I wanted to take my career as a nurse. I am a certified emergency nurse, so I do take that exam every 4 years. So I'm definitely still very well versed with how nerve-wracking it can be to go to your testing center. So while it's been 13 years since I did take that NCLEX exam, don't worry, I go to my Pearson VUE testing center every couple years, and I remember just how nerve-wracking it is. And really, since then, and since I transitioned to the world of emergency medicine, I've also done I worked per diem in a PACU. I also ran a COVID vaccine clinic when the vaccines rolled out. So I eventually sort of stepped away from the emergency department that I was working at. I went per diem there. I did some travel contracts in California. I did a crisis contract when COVID was really bad out in California. And it's really because I was able to take one job, go per diem, and find some other opportunities for myself once I really had a good footing, a good foundation of nurse experience. And again, that's why I do love nursing. You can always really kind of change what you are doing. So, my big interests, besides emergency medicine in the world of nursing, here at Archer Review, I love doing our Thursday live lectures as part of our SurePass product. If you purchase SurePass, you would see me on Thursdays with our live lectures. Otherwise, I also make an appearance in our 3-day live review when you are getting ready to take that NCLEX exam. I love pharmacology, I love respiratory, and I also love endocrine. So those are my very favorite topics to talk about here at Archer Review. And like Kiva said, my primary role at Archer now is that I actually get to work with colleges and other staffing institutions when they decide to purchase Archer Review for their staff. So really, I get the best of all of the worlds. I still get to work with students, but I also kind of now am moving into the business side of things, which is a really great way to just stretch my wings here at Archer Review.
Lexi, I love that. So, a couple of things that you touched on that I think are so key is laying that foundation so that you can feel confident trying new roles. I think that's really important. And I felt the same way with laying the foundation of primary care and then specializing. I see a lot of my friends
Right.
going to specialty right away and kind of getting stuck. And then I love your background. This is so great for this panel because talk about starting a new role over and over again as a travel nurse, right? So you have to really assess the situation. You don't know the unit. And most of the time, these units are in crisis. They're not doing well. It's understaffed. So it really mimics what's happening in our healthcare system right now. So, so much wealth of knowledge and experience that you bring to this panel. I love that. And lastly, you pointed out how many different avenues you've gone in your nursing career, and that's also how I feel about my nursing career and what I want to echo to new grads getting out there, that it really is a field that you can try it. If it doesn't work, that doesn't speak to who you are as a nurse. It just wasn't the right fit, and pivot and try something else, because that's the beauty of nursing, that the world is our oyster. And you guys saw those statistics about the career outcome or the outlook in the next less than 10 years. There are going to be a lot of jobs opening. And so I want you to feel open to trying different things and seeing what fits. So I really love that. And Lexi, I'm really excited for you to be on this panel with me as we're talking about these different topics. I'm also going to talk about our other panelist who we miss dearly today, Rachel Taylor. She's the director of nursing for Archer, which many of you have probably seen already and know of. And she has two sick kiddos at home today. So we're making sure that Rachel is taking care of herself and her family today. And she was super sweet and said, if anybody has any questions, you guys can put it in the chat for her and she'll go ahead and maybe we'll do a live next week where we answer the questions. She did give me her email address, but I don't want to put that on her when she's taking care of two sick kiddos. So go ahead and put whatever questions you have for Rachel, myself, Lexi in the chat. We have our lovely Jennifer Bonner in the chat with us today, and she's going to help us field a lot of those questions. Jennifer is also a wonderful, wonderful nurse, experienced nurse. She has her DNP now, but she has a background in family medicine and midwifery. So another wonderful, huge resource on the webinar today. But let's get into what we're going to talk about in terms of some content, so we can get into asking questions. You guys can go ahead and put those in the chat, and we're also going to do some polling too as we're going through. I want to launch our next poll as we're here, and that's going to be, let me see if I can find my screen. What specialty areas are you interested in? So as we're talking about choosing the best clinical setting, we're going to really be thinking about, where do you want to start? So you heard Lexi and I say that we both started kind of in med surg or primary care, really as a foundation, right? And so what kind of areas do you want to start in? What are you interested in? Or maybe where are your goals in a couple of years once you've gotten that foundation, right? And that's what I want you to be thinking about as you're looking at roles in different clinical settings. Do you want to be on the inpatient side? Do you want to be on the outpatient side? It's also okay if things change as you try it. I thought the inpatient side would be great. I tried it, not for me, right? So I wanted to be on the outpatient side. So I want to hear from you guys. What specialty areas are you interested in? I'm seeing a lot of pediatric nurse, which is wonderful. I really loved my time as a pediatric nurse. Mom, baby, labor, delivery, that's wonderful. Women's health, peds, or family as a nurse practitioner. Honestly, it's been so rewarding, and peds are my favorite patients to take care of, I have to be honest. Lexi, what about you? What are your interest areas? What do you like?
Well, I love everything fast, crazy, and chaotic. That pretty much explains me to a T. I love a good dumpster fire. I do love though when a complex patient comes in and I know that we have to really use those good clinical judgment skills right off the bat. Airway, breathing, circulation. Folks, we harp that all the time here at Arch Review because that's what shows up on the NCLEX exam. But it's true though, when you're taking care of patients, that's also what you need to worry about. So I love when you have to do a lot of things very quickly. You get them all taken care of, you get them stabilized, and then you get to ship them up to the ICU and get ready to take care of the next one. But I really love like trauma patients, and I love complicated like respiratory problems, which sounds pretty crazy. I know.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I can totally see it. I see it.
So for all of you out there that are saying peds, mom and baby, my goodness, I could never be a labor and delivery nurse. When a pregnant woman shows up in the emergency department, I'm looking around for who has L&D experience here, because the hospital that I work at actually they don't even do labor and delivery. So really there's only a couple ER nurses there that actually have any sort of labor and delivery experience. We typically ship them to the hospital just down the road, but I get a little nervous with labor and delivery type things, but I'm still pretty okay with peds. I'm sure I'm not as good as you, Hiva, but the facility that I work at has a very, very large pediatric emergency department, and I would go over there quite often. So I like
It's
peds
so
too.
funny. It's so funny. I always think about my experience back in like my training. I almost passed out watching a labor and delivery on the inpatient side. And I was like, oh, I do not want to
Hmm.
work. I do not want to do this. And then I got to the outpatient side and I was like, I love my mom and babies. And I want to do this on the outpatient side, like the whole
Sure.
journey. And then once they get on the inpatient, I'll pass it off to somebody else. But it's so funny because it's so wide, right? So that category of like mom and baby pediatric, it could be acute or it could be primary care. So there's just
Yeah.
so much out there. But I also see some research, which is really nice because we definitely need a lot more research
Yeah.
clinicians. So I love to see that.
Hey,
Um,
just hot little tip for you out there. If you are a new nurse, though, those research jobs still want you to have a little bit of experience in the hospital world. Just throwing it out there.
I love that. You're absolutely right. And do you know why that is, Lexi? Do you know, like, have you explored the role of research at all?
Yeah, actually, so if you don't mind, just a little quick foray here. So the reason I also
Gossip.
kind of went and did my COVID vaccine role
Yeah.
and to pick up that PACU per diem job, I got a little burnt out after COVID. So I needed to start exploring options. And funny enough, this was about the same time I found Archer Review. So while I was exploring other avenues for my nursing degree, yep, so a couple research jobs came across my search on the interwebs. A lot of the jobs just really want you to have that good nursing assessment background. So they want to make sure that you know what you're looking for. And, there's countless studies out there. You could be a nurse who's really just trending vitals, getting, information on if there's a drug out in trials right now. So there's a wide variety of what research means in the world of nursing, but they need you to really have just that foundation, that footing. So most of the jobs that I had been looking, it's been a little while because I'm pretty happy here at Archer Review, but most of the jobs still want you to have like 2 years like inpatient experience so that you know how to assess a client.
That's beautiful. I love that, especially since a lot of the research jobs are in oncology and you really want to be able to have that assessment skill down so that you know what's happening with your patient
Right.
and with the inclusion exclusion criteria. So that's really nice. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So going back to choosing the best clinical setting, so you can see there's really so many different options, right? And then we're talking about also when you're exploring, when you're interviewing, when you're talking to hiring managers, what are the questions you want to be asking so that you know that it's the best supportive clinical setting before you step into that role? One of the things I really like to ask is like, what is your onboarding process, right? Will there be training for the role? Who's going to be doing the training? And is that person who trains me available on site once I start the role? Those really help you visualize how much support are you going to have in this role. Lexi, what about you? What are some questions you like to ask in that interview process?
I think that onboarding question is definitely spot on there, Hiva. Besides just the onboarding process as well, I like to ask about the unit culture. I really want to know, and every unit is different. That very first med surge job that I had, we had 28 beds on my specific unit. But if you walked about 50 feet down the hallway, you were on another unit, and it was just drastically different. So do they have a tight knit kind of culture? Do they not really know each other outside of work? And either way is fine. There's no problem either way. But I think it is good to ask how that culture is. Do they do any sort of team building exercises? I also, though, want to ask about opportunities for professional development,
Love
even
that.
before I take on a role. Are you going to help pay for my certifications? Like if I do take that CEN exam, are you going to pay for me to take that exam? Is there going to be any sort of extra compensation? Am I going to get an extra dollar or two an hour? Are there any opportunities for me to go to conferences? So that's also something that's definitely a priority for me and something I want to know right off from the jump. Do they offer any sort of partnerships with like any sort of local college? If I do want to go back and get my NP or any other sort of advanced degree.
I love that, Lexi, because that's a big question. How do you assess culture and team dynamics? Because no one's going to tell you, oh, this is a struggling unit and you don't want to be part of this team, right? And I love what you ask those questions about professional development. Are you going to be supporting me and continuing my education? That speaks to the culture, right? That shows you that there's an active nurse manager really running that unit. They are going to be supporting you not only in that role, but also growing within your career. So that is a really nice way to get a sense of the culture and the team dynamics. I love that. That is really great advice. And then the other thing that I like to consider is really work-life balance. So whether it's an RN role or an NP role, how much autonomy do you have for the role? And I'll give you an example. When I started as an RN, this is probably my second or third RN job. I forget because I made a lot of mistakes and grabbed a lot of jobs that I could just to get the experience, and they were awful. So this is the one that actually stuck that I loved. But I was able to have my own schedule with patients, and they came in and saw me, and it was in an outpatient setting. I had standing orders, but I really had autonomy and support in that role to take care of my patients. It was really wonderful. And when you're talking about NP life, how much autonomy do you have in your schedule, right? Can you say, like, this is too many patients. I need to move this type of visit around here on my schedule? The autonomy really comes with job satisfaction and that work-life balance because you can say, like, you know what, we need to bump this visit by 15 minutes because I'm struggling to get here after drop off or whatever you need to do in your home and personal life. Can we just bump this by 15 minutes to give me that room to breathe so I can go into clinic with a clear, calm mind? And same with as you're going through your day, this isn't working. This is too many sick visits back to back in a row. Let's put in a well visit here. How much autonomy do you have in the role? What do you think, Lexi? What about work-life balance? What are some tips there?
Oh, absolutely. That is incredibly important. I think kind of, that first example I gave, right? I started on that med surg unit. I had a lot of crazy kind of stuff going on in my personal life. My mom was sick, and my manager really wasn't very helpful or forgiving with my schedule. And so that was a large part of why I needed to leave. We have to worry about our personal life. We need to prioritize us. So I knew though when I enjoyed hospice. Maybe one day I would even go back to it, but it also I realized I needed actual hospital experience. So like I said, I went back, but I went back on nights and I had to make that sacrifice, but ultimately I went back at 80% and I had way more control over which shifts that I worked. I had a way easier time of clumping them together. I wasn't like having to shift from an AM shift to a PM shift. It was actually quite nice. So that work-life balance is huge in any role. What is the company's PTO policy? One of the big criticisms that I actually do have from the academic medical center that I spent many years of my life working on, their hospital vacation policy is quite garbage. You have to like apply. I'm serious though. Like you have to apply for like your like summer vacation or whenever you want to get like a week off, like 6 months ahead of time. And that doesn't quite work for everybody. So these are even things to consider as well. How far out do I need to request time off? Or do I only need to request it off a month in advance? What if something comes up and I have a doctor's appointment 2 weeks from now? Like, what if I can't get in to see my dentist, but they got me in 2 weeks? But so those are other kind of questions I like to ask as well.
I love that. Absolutely, Lexi. One thing that I've learned the hard way is like asking the question, what happens in an emergency? What happens if I can't come in for my shift? Who
Right.
can cover? Because
Right.
you don't want to be in that situation and have someone say, there's nobody else to cover you. I mean, that puts you in a really hard situation where you really have to decide between work
Yep.
and life, and that's rough. We have a great question from the audience today, and I'm going to read it out loud. But what would you suggest in regard to applying to a unit where I'm wanting to work and there are no openings? That is a really great question because obviously it's probably a unit that's doing a really good job. A lot of people want to be in that unit. So what happens when there's no openings? How can you get your foot in the door? That's a really great question.
Absolutely. Well, my first couple ideas right here to answer that question out there is first of all, so if this is somewhere that you're already working, and I don't know the specifics here, but if you're a patient care tech or you are a nurse in the institution, go meet the manager. Send an email to the manager, look up the manager on LinkedIn. There's a
Hmm.
lot of ways that you can really showcase that this is where you want to be. You want to be part of this unit. I'd also perhaps even ask to see if there's an opportunity for you to shadow, even if you know that it's somewhere that you want to be, just putting in that day, those 8 hours, 4 hours, whatever the shadow experience may be, even just putting in that time and showing that nurse manager that, hey, I'm taking this extra step. Yep, I'm coming in on my day off. I want to make sure that this is a good fit. And actually, that little tip of doing a shadow experience is what I really recommend to anybody who is kind of maybe like, I don't know if this is a great fit for me. And even if you think it is, actually see what it's like for 4 or 8 hours with one of their staff members. Because once you actually are sitting at the nurses station with your fellow coworkers, you're going to pick up on things more than you would in just the manager's office.
I love that, Lexi. You hit the nail on the head. So, really establishing that network, and that really gets us to our next topic is how to establish that network. You said a lot of key things there, right? So, you want to reach out, find out who's the nurse manager, reach out to the nurse manager, establish a relationship with that nurse manager. Also, maybe that's a good mentorship. You could say, these are my career goals. I want to be on this unit. Can you mentor me, right? And I would be willing to shadow you in this role on my days off and really getting to know that unit. You really hit the nail on the head. So building that relationship, establishing that relationship, not only will set you up for success when there is an opening in that unit, but also may open some other doors because usually good nurse managers know other good units too. And they're like, you know what? We don't have a space here, but I think you would be a really good fit here. And why don't you apply here? I'll let that nurse manager know that you came from me, and that really helps build and establish a network too. So that's really great advice. And so
Absolutely.
building that support system is really, really crucial. Mentorship and early career development. It doesn't even have to be a nurse who you want to work with. I remember my first mentor was a teacher, right? So it wasn't even somebody in nursing, but she was a very pivotal mentor for me and really helped me kind of fine tune where I wanted to go in my career and what my skills and assets were and how I could leverage that to find something that was fulfilling. So that mentorship, I think, in early career development is really important. And then how do you find and approach a mentor? That's, I think, tough. Lexi, you hit the nail on the head. I use LinkedIn a lot if there's something I want to kind of reach out to, kind of no shame about it, send a polite little message and say, this is what I'm interested in. Are you interested in like a little not lunch because I think that puts a lot on people, but just if I can come in and talk to you about my career goals and learn a little bit more about your unit, I think that's a nice way to do it too. And then also utilizing those preceptorships and residency programs that Lexi wink wink hinted at. We also have a question from the audience saying most hospitals in my town offer a residency program for new grads, but I don't want to waste my time or lose time when I graduate. So let's talk a little bit about residency programs and our thought process behind it and why we're thinking about it as losing time as opposed to building a stronger foundation. Lexi, what are your thoughts on residency programs?
So I did a residency program and I found it incredibly helpful. So also just a little bit more information. So nursing was actually my second degree. When I went to nursing school, I originally went to college for biology and chemistry, and then I decided, oh, do the healthcare thing. So I did an accelerated 1 year BSN. And so I did a lot of my clinicals in a rural setting. Well, this hospital that I worked at was in a large city and it was totally different. So, in a way, Hiva, I was kind of behind the curve. While I may have had like the book smarts, the actual like bedside experience was drastically different from a small 25 bed rural hospital to a 700 bed academic medical center, right? So I was a little bit behind the curve. So I was very fortunate that I had that little bit of hand holding with my nurse residency program. So when it started off for me, the first 2 weeks, we had hospital orientation, nurse orientation, all those things that you do with all your first nurse jobs. But I didn't lose time. So I'm personally, I'm just a little confused by what this user out there meant by like losing time. Because for me, it was first job. I got paid the same as a nurse. I wasn't even making less money. I just had more support. And then once those first kind of couple weeks were over, we transitioned to meeting every other Thursday and then eventually just every Thursday. And it was part of my scheduled shifts. And so I was getting paid for this time to be in these residency programs. So we learned like right off the bat how the pumps work specifically at that institution, hospital policies, wound care, like really how that hospital did things. And it was just really good hand holding. And actually, because I was just on a general care med surge unit, mine was even less so than our ICU residency would have been. They even had more support. And so for the first, oh gosh, and because it's been over a decade here, please forgive my memory. The first 3 months, I actually worked all of my shifts with one of the nurses on the unit. So I wasn't even in
Wow.
staffing. So that's what I did not lose anything. I
Yeah.
only gained from my
Yeah.
residency experience.
Yeah, I totally echo that. I don't see residencies as losing time at all. It's funny because I understand what this user is saying because in my NP program, even among our faculty, they were discouraging residency programs because they're like, you're ready, get out there, go. You don't need a residency program. And I remember one of my friends, one of my peers, she did a residency program. She was an acute care NP. And the things that she was saying about her residency program, I was like, man, I wish there were more primary care residencies out there because this, like you said, you're in the role. Maybe the pay is not exactly what you would be getting paid because residency is sometimes a little bit less. But honestly, the foundation that you get, the support that you get, it's a lot of weeding out some of these processes that we're talking about making sure you have the proper training, the proper mentor, the proper support on the job so that you can feel confident in the role and stay in the role. Those residency programs, really good residency programs, do offer that. So I don't see it as wasting time at all. This user also said they weren't able to transfer out of the residency program. So I think probably maybe they making the commitment to that unit for a little
Okay.
while is kind of where they don't want to commit to because they have other career goals. But I really don't want you guys to rush, right? I want you to really sink into a role, especially if it's a good supportive role, and stay in it for a while. There's so much room to grow within a supportive role than to bounce around just to get into that role that you think you may want, because you might end up there and say, whoa, I rushed through all of that foundational stuff and now I feel a little bit like out there by myself and I'm a little scared, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. But with that said, I'm going to launch our next poll. And that is if you guys had the opportunity to do a residency program, how many of you would actually take that option? So, on a scale of 1 to 10, would you take a residency if you had the option? The other thing I heard on our live today when I was on there is a lot of nurses are seeing that hospitals really aren't hiring new grad nurses for those residency programs anymore. And I'm not sure why that is because I do see a lot of residencies in our local hospitals here, and it's all for new grads. So I don't know, Lexi, have you heard anything about that?
Well, I can tell you, I know that there's always cuts being made, unfortunately. And so that residency program that I was just raving about has definitely seen some alterations since January of
Oh man.
2012.
Oh man.
But I mean, they don't give you as much time now one-on-one with that nurse on your unit. So I think I had 3 months. I think now it's like 6 weeks. So they are going through, and I know they are making cuts to some of those residency programs, but I also know they are still out there. So I spent a lot of my career working in the Midwest, but I spent also these last couple of years out in California, and there's way more hospitals out there in California than there are in the Midwest just because of population density. Those hospitals that I was familiar with, like in Southern California, Los Angeles, San Diego, they definitely still have those nurse residency programs. They may not be as robust as what I explained my experience was, but they are still out there.
Yeah, I agree. And so look for them and really be patient. I don't want you guys to rush. These are pivotal moments or time for you guys to really lay that foundation. I also want to talk about a little bit about resume tips. Now being on the other side where I'm looking at a lot of resumes, I really want to give some tips and tricks because I personally didn't feel confident at all with my resume when I was putting it together as a new grad. I was like, well, what experience can I put on here? I don't have any experience, right? And I was getting really nervous about it. And I want you guys to really be thinking about the things that you can highlight, look at the role, and really put well-intentioned, well-written, clear objectives in your resume. Don't just throw things on there just for the sake of filling it out. Even if it's short and concise, really look at the role, try to assess what are they looking for, and highlight those things about your background that you can bring to the role that are in sync and are in alignment. You can use keywords, AI now. I've not tried this. I don't know, Lexi, if you've tried it, but I know AI does a lot with resumes, and you can put in the job description and put in your resume, and AI can help you come up with really a tailored resume that really hits on those keywords. But if you don't have that option, really just try to pick out some keywords from the job description from your research that you've done about the unit or maybe the outpatient clinic that you're interested in, and put those keywords in your resume. Make it really well written, clear, and concise, and don't overcrowd it. Always, always, always check spelling and grammar. That just looks messy and sloppy if you're submitting resumes that just have spelling and grammatical errors in there. Have somebody read it for you just to glance it over. Best tip as well, always put your recent experiences first and then go backwards. And if there are any gaps, explain the gaps. So I always kind of felt a little self-conscious about the gaps. I've now, since starting my career, had two kids. And so I've taken little pauses here and there, and I've been nervous about it, like it was a weakness or something. And I learned over time that you're allowed to have a life, right? And so if you don't explain those gaps, then the employer might be like, well, why is this person taking a gap here? But explain it, and people will feel fine about that and understand it. And it'll make you feel confident going into the interview and be like, yes, I raised a family and now I'm back, right? And you can include that in a cover letter. So many people don't include cover letters, including myself. And my husband at one point was like, no wonder you're getting so many rejections. You did not put in a cover letter. Do you know how many resumes they get in a given day? It's like thousands upon thousands. He said and this was at a time when I wasn't really doing the hiring or seeing resumes. And he said that, if I get a resume without a cover letter, immediately I don't even look at the resume because I just want to get a glimpse of who you are in a cover letter. Tell me why you're a good fit for the role, and then I'll take a look at your resume. So those are big tips that I've learned over the years. Lexi, what about you? What are some resume tips and tricks that you've learned?
Okay, so I do want to just right off the bat, I want to talk about that question you asked me, my thoughts on AI. So I never ever want any of you out there having AI write your resume. That is bad, bad plan.
Okay.
But what I want you to do, like Eva said, though, figure out those key objectives. Now, do I use AI? You bet I do. But how do I use AI? I use AI if I'm confused on how to word something like, hey, can you help me phrase this better? I never want you using AI to write a paragraph for you. People who are looking at resumes know when it's not your authentic voice. It's very easy to tell. So that's kind of my like warning about AI. Again, do I use it? Yes, but I use AI to help me sort of rephrase things when my brain is all jumbled up, or I use it to help me go through grammar or really the formatting. So there's, freebie AI out there. There's also things like Grammarly that I use to help me with my grammar. I'm definitely pro things like that. But when it comes to all out having AI do your resume, absolutely not. You lose that authenticity. You definitely need to highlight those objectives. Something else too, I have quite a few friends that work in HR. My friends that work in HR also want that resume to be neat and tidy in appearance. They also want to be able to just quickly scan down it and be able to grab what experience that you have. Hiring managers don't actually want to sit there and read a full paragraph. They're going to get tired, they're going to get bored and go enough on to the next one. So I definitely want you to even try to hone down. And if you need to put a paragraph into an AI device and say, hi, how can you turn this into maybe a brief list of my experiences? That's something I would encourage you to explore. But again, don't have AI write that full resume. And then just something else I want to mention too is the idea of those gaps. Look, here's my opinion of a gap. Yes, absolutely, you need to be able to explain it, but gaps are more than okay. Like Hiva said, I have a couple gaps on my resume that I was kind of like, almost embarrassed about as well. But now, as I'm a little bit older here, I've realized that if a company is going to have a hard time with me not working for a month or two, is that ultimately the kind of organization that I want to work for? And so somebody like put that on me and they're like, and I, that was just kind of groundbreaking way of thinking about things like, yeah, I had something going on. I needed to sort that out. And then I got right back to working. So if you have a problem with that, then I'm probably not going to be the right fit for your organization.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely, Lexi. Hit the nail on the head there. Really great resume tip advice. Negotiating. Let's jump into that. So, how do you negotiate? Do you negotiate? I'm going to launch our next poll, especially as a new grad. This is going to be a really interesting question because a lot of new grads don't feel like they have negotiating power. So, do you negotiate? And you can go ahead and put that in there. And how do you negotiate? I've put in a free text for you guys so you can write in there. If you're feeling a little nervous, let's go through the negotiations. You can type in the background. We'll come check back on that poll. But negotiating that first offer. So say you've done all the legwork, you've now found that clinical setting that you really like, and you are now getting offered that job. So great, kudos to you, awesome job. What do we do at this stage, right? The offer itself, I really want you to understand a few key things. The salary. Do you understand what the salary is? Is it a base salary? Is it based on bonuses? Is there a bonus structure associated with it? What are the benefits that come with it, including PTO, 401k? That is going to be your base offer. In addition to that, you want to also understand the schedule. The schedule is a big part of it, right? So, can you negotiate the work schedule? Kind of like what Lexi said. Days didn't work for her, nights worked for her, and she dropped down to 0.8 so that she was getting paid the same as if she was working full-time days, but it gave her a little bit more room to breathe, right? And deal with what was happening at home. And so the schedule is a big part of the negotiation, and understanding your schedule when you get the offer is a big thing you should be asking. What are the hours? What are the expectations? What are the shift differentials, right? I made mistakes of taking call without getting paid. I mean, I didn't even realize that you got paid extra for call until I was like a year in, and I said, wait a minute, you're supposed to, but I'm supposed to be getting paid? I thought this was part of the role. So you really want to talk about all that in that initial offer and get it in writing. And then some additional considerations. Do they do tuition reimbursement? So kind of what Lexi said, are they going to support you in getting additional certifications, professional development opportunities? And is there a contract that they want you to sign? Read the contract. Are there any red flags in the contract? Are they going to limit you in where you can go next if this job doesn't work out? That's going to be a big one. Any tips, Lexi, on what we just talked about with the negotiating?
Well, it's funny that you say that, Hiva, because my partner, he's an acute care nurse practitioner that works in a hospital setting. So he works in the inpatient world. And we literally just negotiated a job offer for him about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I know it's scary. And we've both been doing this nurse thing, and he's been a nurse longer than I've been a nurse. It is scary to negotiate. You know, you're worried that they're going to say no. And okay, so they say no. They're okay, they said no, then you have to make another decision. That's
Yeah.
it. So that's
Yeah.
also something that like my partner and I were talking about, that okay, so we're going to ask for these things, we're going to, this is what we're going to ask for, but if they say no, it's just an answer. No is an answer. That's also, it is scary. We looked at the overall PTO and we were able to negotiate a couple more hours on his contract. They also were able to move up a little bit on the salary. And again, when we work, we are doing a job for an organization. We are doing a job for an institution. And I don't think they automatically want to open up with the biggest amount, the largest amount of money that they will give us. So that's also just something to keep in the back of your head, that you are worth a lot.
Yeah.
You are, and I think Eva, you also, know your worth. So
Yeah.
you are going to be working hard for this organization. You're going to be working many hours for them. So it's important that you feel that this is a good, equitable amount of money for the work that you are going to be doing for them. I do think that the idea of figuring out the work schedule is very huge. I didn't even really think about that with that first job of mine. Like, oh, okay, yay, I got a job. That's awesome. but then realizing, oh my goodness, there's this awful thing that's happened to me in my personal life, and there's like no wiggle room. My manager won't even give me like a run of like 3 or 4 in a row so that I could kind of have a couple more days off. And so that is a very important to think thing to think about, as well as like all of those other considerations, like the reimbursement, the professional development opportunity, and then any red flags are definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a lot of things that come with experience. So believe me, Lexi and I have both made these mistakes. I've taken jobs, many jobs where I was underpaid and just thought, okay, I just got to get my foot in the door. And really, that does speak to the organization too. If they're
Yeah.
undervaluing you and underpaying you and not willing to negotiate, so maybe they can't meet you in salary, but as Lexi pointed out, maybe they can make up for it for extra PTO time in your bank. If companies are not, or hospitals, groups, clinics, if they're not willing to do that, that I think should be a red flag as well, because that's really speaking to how they're going to be looking at you as an employee and treating you as an employee. And that's something to be mindful of as you're signing up for that role. So, really great advice. And so, lastly, you've taken the role, you've now signed the contract. And so, how do we thrive in that first year? So, you started the job. How do you stay in the job and thrive, right? How do you set yourself up for success? And this one is really big for me because this is something that I struggle with still. And so, I try to prioritize really that self care. Managing your own stress can really help avoid burnout. Burnout is a term I think that gets thrown around a lot, but it really avoids getting you to the point where you just don't care anymore. And that's not why you got into nursing, right? So we really want to make sure we're taking care of ourselves so that we can do this important work. I think the statistic is 2022 National Healthcare Retention and RN Staffing Report found that the turnover rates among novice nurses within that first year was about 32%. So that's almost half. That's crazy. So about 32% of nurses either leave that job or leave the field of nursing within that first year because they're not doing these things. They're not prioritizing themselves. Time management is really tricky, especially when you're in that first role, because you're not going to know everything, but you know what? That's okay. And you can have someone really coach you and help you in helping prioritize your skills and how to manage your schedule or your patients that you're seeing during your shift. And then continuing education is also a really, really great way to make sure that you're thriving in your career, setting those long-term career goals and seeking out those opportunities for those additional certifications and education will really help you keep informed in the field as well as feel like you're reaching your goals, right? You can't reach goals that you haven't set. So really thinking about those long-term goals is really important. Lexi, what are your thoughts on thriving in that first year?
Okay, so I've got two things I want to say here. First off, that last point about that continuing education, I want to use a little bit like of an analogy here. So let's say you're in New York City and your goal is to get to Los Angeles via car, right? You can get in your car and you can start driving. No maps, no cell phone, nothing. And you could probably figure it out with the major highways in the United States. However, you're probably going to be taking a couple wrong roads, right? Oops, I should have taken that one. Whoops. Well, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to get back to that main thoroughfare. Now, if you are using a map, you're using your iPhone, whatever device you may be using, and you set it New York City, your goal is Los Angeles, boom, you are going to be on the beeline and you're going to get there a lot faster. Can you get there either way? Sure. But that's why I think it's important to sort of have that beeline for your goals, the importance of setting those long-term career goals. Like if I decided, okay, well, one day I want to go into education, maybe I would get there. But if it's more so, I'm going to work in a hospital for 2 years. After that 2 year mark, I'm going to start exploring new opportunities. I'm going to start looking for a graduate program. It's going to take me 2, 3 years to get that degree. From then, I'm going to hope to get a job here. And you can always change the plan as you go. But I do think that is important to at least map out that plan. And it doesn't have to be complete. Even some type of like loose skeleton based plan would be great. Now, there's one more point though I want to make on how to thrive in your first year that's not listed on here. And I wish I knew this a little bit more way back when I was a fresh baby nurse in my early 20s. Money. Nobody talks money management. Nobody tells you what to do with your income. And as a fresh young 20-year-old woman who had reliable income, I didn't quite even understand a 401k. I didn't understand, nor was I worried about retirement. I really wish I would have taken that time to put a little bit more emphasis with, okay, if I'm going to be doing this for 20, 30, however many years, how can I set myself up for long-term success? How can I start paying down those nursing loans? I really wish I would have had that foresight even in that very first year.
I think I see another webinar topic coming our way, Lexi. I love that because I think that's something that we all struggle with and we learn the hard way, which is so
Yeah,
tough unless somebody really took the time to teach that to us.
right.
Oftentimes, nobody has been able to do that because it's something tough for everyone to manage, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you guys, we're reaching the end of our hour, but this was such a lively conversation. I really appreciate all the questions in the chat. Biggest key takeaway is really connect with your community, right? Start there, start networking. We here at Archer are a community of supportive nurses. So if you're not already connected with us, please make sure you do connect with us. We have our NCLEX team, our nursing team, as well as our advanced practice team. And we have things like our social media and Facebook groups that you can scan this QR code and join our community. We have mentors that are happy to coach you through it. You can always email us directly. But the biggest takeaway is to really start laying the foundation, reaching out and establishing your community. A supportive community will get you to whatever long-term goals you set. And any other parting words, Lexi, that you can think of before I launch our last poll of the morning?
My just really that you can do this. I know it's scary, but you can do this. Find that job that is right for you. Do not take that first job that gives you an interview or gives you that offer. If you feel any sort of feeling in your gut, I say all the time to students I'm working with when they're getting ready for NCLEX, trust your gut. If your gut is telling you that this may not be the right fit, it may not be the right fit, and there are pardon me, there are other opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That is beautiful advice. I think if you take anything away from this webinar, that is beautiful. Be patient, trust your gut, and don't jump into something that's not a good fit. That is wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Lexi, for joining us today.
Thank you
This
for
was
having
such a
me. It
wonderful
was so
webinar.
fun.
I'm gonna stay on for a few minutes and see if anybody else has any other questions. But I really appreciate your time and all your advice and all your wisdom. I really appreciate
Thank
it. And the
you.
students, thank you everyone for all your questions and for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, folks.
Bye, Lexi. And folks, for those of you who are still on, go ahead and tell me, this webinar series is something new that we're trying to really support our nursing community. And the whole point of this webinar series is to provide topics that you would find useful and helpful. So if you want, go ahead. It's a free text poll that's up for you here today, but tell me, what other topics would you like to see in these monthly professional development webinars? We've now had three. I believe this is our third one. We talked about transitioning from RN to NP. We talked about going back to school for different graduate programs. Today, we're talking about supporting new graduate nurses, whether you're an RN or an NP. What other topics would you like to see? We're really doing this series every month for you guys to really support you in this nursing community. So go ahead and leave me a couple of thoughts and what you'd like to see. How to succeed in grad school. I love that. Yes, that's a great topic, especially since there are a lot of different options, right? So again, in our first webinar series, we talked about what does grad school look like for the nurse? What are your options? Because there's so many different options within Masters of Science in Nursing. So if you want, go back and watch that webinar. Maybe we'll do one more focused on how to succeed in graduate school if you're really not finding that your school is supporting you. That's great. And if you guys can think of anything else, again, feel free to email us directly. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day and I really appreciate your joining today. See you next month.